I am doing this podcast as an additional activity for my research, which will be looking at spluma, special justice, and informal settlements. Then my case study is in Iguruleni. So this is hopefully this will help me uncover if the development principles in spluma are actually effective. Okay, so the podcast aims to unpack informality through the lens of land use management. I set out to do this by interviewing various actors, including informal occupiers of space, emerging urban planners, law enforcers of bylaws, and experienced professionals such as yourself. Okay, can you please start by introducing yourself?
Okay, no, thank you. Thank you so much for the opportunity. My name is Pheeha Arthur Molele. I'm a registered professional town planner with SAC Plan with over 10 years experience at the local government level. Throughout my career, I think I've focused solely on land use and spatial planning. So I was one of those fortunate planners who actually saw the transition when we transitioned from the old order legislation to the new order, which is Pluma currently. So that's me in the nutshell, yeah.
Okay. Okay, so for my second question, since you said you've like seen the transition and you've been in local government for so long, so I'm sure you've been exposed to like both urban and rural informality. So how would you differentiate the two in terms of the mechanisms, dynamics, and like your experience as a technocrat?
When it comes to informality, to be honest, as planners, I remember, I think since you're saying you're doing your honors, I think you're familiar with the modernist planning theory, which for me, I think that's where, the issue of informality centers around that. Because now, the planning that we currently have as planners is centered around the idea of zoning, around the idea of regulation, is your using line. So that's where it emanates from because planning has evolved as a profession over the years, from the time of your occupancy, over the years it has evolved. So how do I define the two? Informality is broad. That's how I'll
Yeah.
start. Because now one can also look at the issue of street trading, within our cities. That's also on its own, its informality. One, because now in your case, specifically, talking about land use, which my assumption, you're looking at the issue of, not complying with the zoning scheme or your town planning
Yes.
scheme. So informality is broad. Even when I look at your question, at first I was a bit taken aback. So for me, how do I distinguish the two? In most urban areas, like previously before Spuma came into play, we used to have town planning scheme for those specific urban areas. So now the particular property will have a particular zoning. So now in cities, due to influx of individuals, people looking for accommodation, and like that, so people tend to actually do the things which, are not, in terms of the law, because most people don't actually understand what is planning, what is wrong, what is right. So the moment I have a house or I have a plot, I feel like I can do whatever. So in terms of the urban context of informality, we have that element where people are not actually complying with the zoning schemes, so it's very rife. I even did a study where I tried to actually look at how the municipalities, response options to the issue of informality, because you find that most municipalities, they go for the laissez-faire approach, where you turn a blind eye. We know the informality is there and there, but people tend to ignore. So for me, that's how I view urban informality. When it comes to rural informality, uh, I'm not a fan of saying that there is rural informality, to be honest,
Okay.
because back in the day, our great grandfathers used to live in harmony. They knew that they used to know how to use their land. You'll have communal land for grazing, land for So when someone says rural informality, because now we're trying to subject it to all this new regulation and town planning scheme, but Spluma, what it has done now is trying to actually have what is known as a world scheme, where it says that every area within a municipality must be covered by land use scheme. So for me, that's where the idea comes from of informal rural informality, where we're saying, if this is a zoning scheme, you can do this, you can do this. So for me, that's why. But there's been a pushback, to be honest. There's been a pushback, particularly from the traditional authorities, as to why do you want to impose this to them? Because you must remember, municipalities and also the traditional authorities, those are the closest type of uh, governing structure, which are closest to the people. So sometimes, rural authorities, traditional authorities feel like they are being undermined by us, especially when we come with terms like rural informality. They ask you, what is rural informality? Because
Mm,
this is how we've been living. So for me, I feel rural informality, what is that? Because I don't feel we need to subject our people to all this modernist, planning theories and trying to impose those. Rather, we should learn on how they're doing things, how were they managing, the land use. I think that's why I think as planners we've missed the plot. We're trying to impose all these foreign, tools and whatever on the traditional authority, which for me doesn't sit well with me.
yeah. Okay. So for my next question, so we've like observed a legislation shift for like the past 20 years with regards to planning and land use, which has actually like put Bloom at the forefront as a tool for spatial transformation. So as someone who has had the opportunity of adapting and implementing these changes, what do you think the triumphs and shortcomings have been with this new period that we're in?
It's very hard to tell, because remember, Spluma is not a silver bullet, for a better
Yeah.
lack of, you know, we cannot expect to see changes overnight. That's where we should actually start. As much as it's a new legislation, there are certain shortcomings, when it comes to the legislation. I'll start with the issue of, they've got quite very good, principle like your special justice, where they're saying, we need to focus more on previously, disadvantaged areas and stuff like that. That's very good on paper. But now the challenge comes in now when you have to actually implement that piece of paper. I think what we're doing as a country, we're very good in terms of coming with all these policies, all these tools, but what is lacking is the actual implementation because people don't want to comply with that. Imagine now you are in a municipal area where 90% of the land is privately owned or 90% is owned by traditional authorities. Now, if those particular individuals are not on board, how do you then ensure that those particular principles, which are very good on paper, are implemented? So those are some of the shortcomings that I feel, are there. I feel people are not actually taken along. I think we failed to identify relevant stakeholders when this particular Spluma Act came to the fore. I think it was something that was just imposed because I feel we're under pressure after that court case that hey, give me time, you must come. So I feel no one is, no, not all stakeholders were on board. So when it came through this Pluma, we all thought that no, things are gonna be much easier. But I think the implementation part it's where it's quite tricky. But there are quite positives, which with Pluma, there are quite a number of positives. If you check now, the issue of having municipal planning tribunals, having appeals, so it makes our life easier. And I feel Pluma is actually encouraging us to be more innovative in our approach, as planners. How you see things, how can, we better, do planning. So for me, I think there are certain positives, but I think we still have a very long way to go because this is still a very new legislation. And I
Yeah.
feel there are quite a number of gray areas which I think we as planners, can do better moving forward to the future. At least it's a good start, to begin with. So for me, yeah, that's what actually, I've picked up with Pluma, yeah.
Okay. Okay, so for the fourth question, so land use management has been identified as a stumbling block for informal settlement upgrading and like recognition of informality as well as the support thereof. So can you please just briefly on the following key challenges that I pointed out from that statement? So the first one is tenure security. The second one is capacity at local government and resource allocation. Then the third one is the lack of innovation or flexibility within land use management. And I feel the failure that is coupled with that to recognize the informal logic.
No, I disagree with the statement. For me, I don't think land use is a hurdle to informal settlement, to be honest. I'm
Okay.
talking from experience. I'll give an example, right? If you come to local government at municipal level, right, you find that we have a department that deals specifically with human settlement issues, which you find that planners are not even involved in that particular department, right? So
Yeah.
now, when someone says land use management is a hurdle, it's not a hurdle. Remember, we must always go back to the basics. to say, what is the purpose of town planning? We're saying we're trying to create order, harmony, and stuff like that. So now people tend to take advantage of the fact that maybe there are disasters, blah, 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 blah. We can get our way. So now when they don't want to comply with what the law requires, they now tend to say, land use is stumbling block. So for me, to begin with, I disagree with that statement that land use management is hardly. It's not a hardly. Now, to touch on the issue of tenure security, it's a serious issue. But now, the way it's captured, if I was to ask what is tenure security, because now we're talking about, the famous one, with the constitution, where they want to amend that section, expropriation without compensation. So, what's the use of me having full title where someone somewhere can just easily, amend the constitution tomorrow, or even when I feel I've got secure tenure, they can still come and expropriate my piece of land? Does that actually, talks about tenure security? Is that tenure security? What is tenure security? Because most people tend to think by having a title deed, a piece of paper, that's tenure security, which I also have my different views. So, firstly, land use management is not a hurdle. I think we need to work together, because if you come to local government, there's this silo mentality where, especially when it comes to a special development framework, during the, when they do the SDF, we find that human settlement guys are there. You've got the engineers doing their own thing there. So when it comes to the actual abrogating of this informal settlement, there's nothing, there's no information, like the issue of, bulk infrastructure. We don't have that. The guys from human settlement, they never actually tell you what they are looking for, how many you need. So there are all those challenges for me, which I feel if they were to be addressed at the local level, I think people can see the land use not actually a hurdle. Now, when it comes to the issue of capacity, Spluma has actually taken a toll on most municipalities, because we don't have qualified planners at the local government. We don't have the capacity. That's why I'm telling you, sometimes it's rare to get town planners running human settlement directorate or departments at the municipality, where now you've got individuals who don't understand, what goes into the planning and all of that. So that on its own also plays a massive role in terms of us thinking that land use management is a hurdle, whereas it's a capacity issue. When it comes to innovation, I'm failing to understand that. For me, there is innovation in land use scheme, because okay, fine. As much as people are always claiming that we have adopted your master plan, the European style of planning, where this is the blueprint plan, I feel, there is flexibility in land use management. Why I'm saying this, if you look at one element of, I think it's the principle of resilience. I think it's resilience. So currently, I'm currently based in a coastal town. We've had issues with the climate change. We've been hit by a drought for the past 8 years. Recently, we've experienced some flooding there and there. We're trying, to be innovative in our approach to say, okay, fine, how do we best plan for municipalities that, we don't actually, experience the same. So for me, I think there is innovation in land use. It's pity that, is there will, do we have skilled individuals within those, department of the municipality? I think it comes touched to the issue of capacity and resources, because innovation is there. Also the will. You remember also we're operating in a political space, which sometimes makes things quite difficult, So as a planner, you always fall back on the issue of the law says this. So sometimes the environment you work within, does it even allow innovation? Does it encourage innovation, the style of management that you're under? So there's quite a lot of things. So I won't solely put it on land use, say that land use is not innovative. It is, even if you check, I think it's one of the principle of Spluma. I think it's principle of social justice. I think it does allow some element of innovation, find ways on how to ensure that, people get secure tenure, because I've seen in one municipality where, in terms of the tumbling scheme, if you are having a residential zone one plot, certain rights like your crash, your house shop, you get them freely as long as you can just come to municipality. So they're trying to, to allow people, to have those land without going through this tedious process. So for me, there is innovation and flexibility in lending. But if one looks at it from the point of blueprint planning, I can agree, but that will be looking at spatial planning. We'll be moving more towards, your SDFs. That's where, for me, I think, yeah, I would say sometimes this lack of innovation and flexibility, because SDF in its nature is just a blueprint. This is what I want. Anything above that it doesn't allow. So, but that's how I see it. Yeah, that's how I see it. I think there is innovation and flexibility in use.
Okay. Then for the last question, what would your advice be to the next generation of planners in terms of how you think planners can better accommodate informality within our field, and especially through land use management tools? Because what we've observed is, like, especially in my class, I'm probably one of the few who are interested in land use management. It's
Mm.
a very, people tend to run away from it, from all the different kinds of planning. So for those who want to go into that space, what would your advice be for us to integrate informality, since we live in a developing country and we're characterized by informality?
Yeah, we can never run away from informality. That's the basic. We can never run away from informality. And I don't think. I think the problem is that where we are moving as a country, we are trying to get rid of informality. I think
Yeah.
we have diagnosed a wrong problem. Informality will always be there and will be part of us, right? Because remember, there is issue of urbanization now. If you look at research literature, I forgot the numbers, but I think is it by 2050, 60% of people will be living in urban spaces. Now there is lack of housing in urban centers. You look at that. The Islamization of our cities. If you come to Joburg, I think you're familiar with that. If you go to the inner center of Gauteng, of Johannesburg. So now, for me, I don't see informality in that, in a bad sense. I feel we as okay, the new generation planners, I think they should focus more on how do we plan for this informality. How do we then plan for them? Because it's something that is going to stay with us for a very long time. But for as long as now we tend to favor the modernist type of planning, we will always have problems. We will always see informality as a threat. For me, I think informality needs to be well planned, ensure that those particular individuals have access to services. But how do I put this? I think also government must do more. Government, there should be political will, because certain things are out of our control as professional. We can do as much, but I think once we put our mind to it and see it positive, we mustn't see it in a negative lens to say, informality. No, we shouldn't do that. So for me, I think it's a space where we need to actually. But when you talk about informality, that's why I'm saying informality is very broad. Informality
Yeah.
is very broad. There was one case that, yeah, where we dealt with the issue of street traders, right? We discovered that there was lack of services and infrastructure to support the street traders, which were regarded as informal in that space. I think it was in Nelson Mandela. We did a study there. Now you can see that sometimes when we see informality, we see it in the negative side. But now informality itself, in that sense, is support families. Families are able to make a living out of that. But us not supporting them, we're trying to chase them away from the city urban centers, to say, no, we don't comply. This, to actually affect the image of our city. So I think we need to shift and move away from that and acknowledge and embrace that there is informality, and we need to have, find innovative ways on how do we best manage this informality. For me, I think, yeah, that would be my advice to say, don't shy away from it. Be innovative and find ways that will make our lives much easier. Because by just providing housing, throwing, because we tend to think that people are looking for houses. I think that's another element where we just think, if we build them a house, it's fine. We've dealt with informality. I think there's a lot of things that goes into that. And also, if you check our current economic status
Yeah.
account, unemployment is very high, social ills which are associated with informality. So there's a lot of things that are involved in informality where I feel planners can come in and make a huge difference. For me, I think, planners mustn't shy away from this, they must tackle it. And I think, actually, land use management tools will actually, do actually help and assist. So just need planners who are pretty brave and who are very innovative, like we previously say. I think it can be done. It can be done in moving forward.
Okay.
Yeah.
That is the last question. Thank you so much, Galomo.
Nope.
Um,
Nope.
it will be posted on YouTube. I'll send you the link. There you can view interviews by my classmates with other planners and yeah, see what we've been up to.
Okay. No, no
Okay,
problem.
thank you so much for your time. Bye.